Right now, I'm in my recipe meta box that we created previously. I'm going to paste some fields. Don't panic. There's nothing special going on here. This is just Bootstrap markup. There's no PHP logic or JS applied to these fields. There are two things I want you to notice, though. There is no form. Actually, this whole page is wrapped in a form, so we don't have to create a form inside the meta box. Second are the name attributes for each input field. One, I prefixed each name with R underscore because WordPress will generate a lot of fields for custom post types. So, we want our fields to stand out. That's it. I'm going to fill in some of these fields really quick. Alright, so I decided to make a recipe for a cake. I just pasted in some generated content by a lorem ipsum generator. I'll provide a link to that in the resources section. I also added some tags and categories. Lastly, I just filled in our fields. Nothing really special. Feel free to fill in these fields however you like. Just make sure you fill out the recipe fields. Don't submit this post just yet. We have to create the logic for processing and saving our input. Inside the index file, let's add the action hook save_post. This hook is triggered when a post is saved. Of course, we only want to use this hook if the post is a recipe post. To make sure we only process recipe posts, we add _recipe to the hook name. Just like that, this hook will only be triggered for recipe posts. The function we want to call is r_save_post_admin. For this part of the lecture, we're going to actually use the two extra parameters that are optional for the add_action function. The third parameter is priority. There is a possibility that other plugins might use this hook. The order of execution is determined by this third parameter. If this is set to 1, then this function will fire first before all others. If set to a higher number, then our function will fire last. The default priority is 10. We're going to leave this at 10. The fourth parameter is what we really want to set. This parameter allows us to define how many arguments are sent to our function. What does this actually mean? Well, action hooks can provide our functions with extra information about the action currently happening. Not every action provides this, but the save_post does. By default, this value is always 1. However, the save_post hook provides 3 arguments. So, set this to 3. The only way to find out if an action hook provides extra arguments is by checking the WordPress documentation. At this point, I want you to create a folder called Process. Just like last time, we want any functions and files related to processing data in a separate folder. Create a file called save-post.php and define our function here. This function will be provided 3 arguments. The first is the post_id. The second is post, which contains info about the post itself. The third is update. This variable is a Boolean value. It will let you know whether this is a new post or an old one being updated. Inside this function, I'm going to check if update is false. If it is, I know this is a new post, and so therefore, I don't want to process anything. So, I'm going to simply return this function. Next, I'm going to output the post variable and format it. Then, I'm going to kill the script. Let's submit our recipe post and see what we get. There's a lot being submitted, but we won't concern ourselves with most of this data. Most of this is handled by WordPress anyway. The data we do want to take a look at is our metadata. If you scroll to the bottom, you'll see the 5 fields we created being submitted. You should see your input appear for each of them as well. Now that we've confirmed our data is being sent, we can process it and save it. I'm going to create an array called recipe_data. Then I'm going to create a key called ingredients and set its value to the corresponding post value. I'm also going to sanitize this by using the sanitize_text_field function. I'm going to do this for the rest of our fields. You should have something similar to what I have at this point. The last and final step is to attach this data to our post. WordPress provides a function called update_post_meta. There's another function called add_post_meta. But we're not going to use it. The update version will actually check if this data already exists. If it doesn't, then it'll create it for us. So it's a kill 2 birds with 1 stone kind of scenario. I'll provide a link to this function in the resource section of this lecture. We're going to pass in 3 things. First is the post ID. Even though this is a new post, WordPress will be smart enough to provide us with a post ID that will be used. So let's pass in the post_ID variable. Next is the name for this metadata. There can be multiple metadatas for one post. It's important that we pass in a unique key. I'm going to name it recipe_data. Lastly, we pass in the value for our metadata. It's that simple. Let's resubmit our data and the post will now be saved. Our fields don't contain the metadata though. Let's fix this. I'm back inside my meta box. At the top of the function, I'm going to create a variable called recipe_data and assign its value to the value returned by the get_post_meta function. This function has 3 parameters which we want to set. The first parameter is the ID of the post. How do we get the post ID from a meta box? Actually, WordPress provides us with the post variable inside our function we can accept by adding post. This variable is an object which contains properties related to the current post. One of these properties is the ID. The second parameter is the name of the metadata's key. We previously named this recipe_data. The third parameter is kind of an odd one. The value returned can either be an array or single value. However, our data is already an array. Despite this, we're going to set this as true. This will now return a single value, which in our case is an array. 99% of the time, you'll want this to be true. This parameter is the most confusing, so just trust me and always set this to true. All we have to do now is set each of these fields' values to its corresponding value in our array. Refresh your page, and you should see your values being outputted. This should confirm that our data is being saved when we submit our post. Before I end this lecture, there's actually one more problem that we face. Try adding a new recipe. You'll see that we get these errors in our meta box. This is because our post meta doesn't exist. So how do we solve this? It's simple. We just check if our values are empty and then create some default values. Add this bit of code really quick. Refresh your page now and you should see the errors disappear. Before I end this lecture, I'm going to make one small modification to our save post file. I'm going to add a rating and rating count key and set both their values to 0. We'll be using these later.